2024 today with Brighter Super People's Day. Amy Phillips is live out enjoying the sunshine, the atmosphere. Ames, how are the crowds today?
Lyndsey, to say that the place is full is an understatement. The Machinery Mile is jam-packed, as is Meat Street. But of course, what a stroke of genius by Beef Australia to hold their event in the lead-in to Mother's Day. And that's why I'm in the Robert Schwarten Pavilion, which is where, fellas, you all need to come by Friday. Look at the kids that we've got lined up here. They're enjoying having a break. Cue the little ones at the back. They're enjoying having a break in this pavilion while Mum does a spot of shopping at the likes of Something Different, which is a local store here in Rockhampton, which has a pop-up here. And Talia is, your team, Talia, at Something Different, has worked really hard for this Beef Australia event with trying to tailor what you've got on offer to exactly what people are wanting.
Yeah, that's right. So we've worked alongside some of our suppliers to bring our beef community some special things just for this week. So yeah, we've done things different from what we usually have in our stores. But yeah, we've worked with people from all around the world to bring everyone this. Yeah.
Work with me here, Nathan. Let me point out, eat more beef, giddy up, howdy. Just some of the beef-inspired things that you can buy here at the Robert Schwarten Pavilion. You've got Warner's fine jewellery over there, pearls for girls. Stock coat doesn't quite fit the brief, boys. Don't get too distracted by a few of the others. It's all about mums this Sunday. Just putting a public service announcement out there, Lyndsey, that this is the part of the world that all the fellas need to come by before they leave Beef Australia. Do you think we should ask the kids if they've thought about Mother's Day? Let's do it.
Good idea.
Hello, what's
Good
your
prompt.
name?
Matilda.
Sorry, what's your name?
Matilda.
Oh, Matilda. Did you remember, or has the school reminded you, but it's a public holiday, so no doubt they haven't. It's Mother's Day. This Sunday coming, don't forget. I think what we need to do is prompt Dad to not forget, probably more age appropriately. Dad might hold the credit card still. What's your name?
Dixie.
What's your name?
Evie.
Evie.
Freddie.
Oh, Freddie. Hello.
Hello.
Hello, how are you, mate? And where are you all from?
There's a place called Old Rawbell and we're cousins and they live out at the Luba.
I love it. The hats are sun-safe for this People's Day, of course, Brighter Super People's Day, Lyndsey. This part of the world, do I need to pan back to remind you, fellas? This is where you need to be by the end of the week.
Amy, I'm going to go empty my wallets just for fun because it looks fantastic over there. And Pearls for Girls,
Yes.
My favourite place to get pearls. I get them there every time I'm at a show. Hey, it's great to see you out there on the grounds. Enjoy the atmosphere. Here in studio, we're going to talk about one of the hot topics of this year's beef. 14% of Australia's national emissions are directly linked to agriculture. A newly formed climate research centre is aiming to ensure that agricultural industries can keep growing while simultaneously achieving zero net emissions by 2040. So what is the state of play for the grassroots and what do we need to keep up with the regulations? We're joined by Zero Net Emissions Ag Climate Research Centre CEO Richard Heath, Queensland cattle producer and Deputy Chair of Cattle Australia Adam Coffey, and Dr Wayne Hall with the State Government's Ag Science Division. Great to have you all here. Richard, let's just start with explaining what the CRC exists to do. What's the plan?
Well, Lyndsey, the CRC exists to do exactly what it says in its name. Its sole purpose is to let agriculture in Australia get to zero net emissions, but it's going to do it by investing in research and technologies that provide the solutions that farm businesses can adopt to lower their emissions in a really importantly in a profitable and productive way.
Well, it's a very pressing time to be making all of this work in tandem. And Adam Coffey, you're a producer who is actively taking big steps in this space. And I'd like to know firstly what you are doing. You're in central Queensland, what you're doing there, but also whether you're doing it with market access in mind or profit in mind.
Look, it's a good question, and I think it's really important that we talk, in the emissions space, we talk around what we do but why we do it. For us, it's really on an opportunistic basis. The carbon market's been evolving so quickly. On farm, we were early adopters, I guess, of the soil carbon project. We've got some silver pasture agroforestry stuff going on, but to us, it's it's about profitability, it's about productivity. And if there are co-benefits there in terms of, sequestration of carbon, however they may be rewarded, then we're very interested in that. But as I said, we're foremost very interested in the productivity of our business.
And I think that's one of the real opportunities to look at through this is, yes, there's some responsibilities that are occurring, but there are opportunities within that too. Dr. Wayne Hall, how does the department work in tandem with producers to help them achieve a net zero result?
Thanks, Lyndsey. So, look, one of the key things to bear in mind at the moment is we don't have all the answers. So the most important thing from a beef producer's point of view is to make sure they're running the most efficient business they can at the moment. So reducing the cost of greenhouse gases per kilogram of beef produced. So that's what they can be doing now. We've got numerous research projects underway looking at how do we get, from a grazing point of view, how do we get some of these new compounds that are coming out into those extensive livestock areas. So how do we do that? We've got some work looking at, well, what are some of the native species out there that may be able to already reduce greenhouse gas emissions? So we've got some exploratory work there. Methods to Market was a project that's recently finished, and it worked with 9 case study producers across Queensland to look at, well, what are some of the technical and economic barriers to getting involved in some of the carbon and natural capital markets. So lots of work. Very keen to be part of the CRC for zero net emissions. So, and that's where we'll be directing our focus going forward in terms of future research.
Well, that brings me to a really interesting point, I guess, with you, Richard, which is around the economic imperatives of farming day to day. Emissions reductions feels like a trade-off against that. How do you actually achieve a win-win?
I think the win-wins are there because there's a very simple equation that you can think of in terms of how emissions are produced, and that is if there is carbon in grass or pasture that cattle are eating and that carbon is going into the animal and then going up into the air as emissions, it means it's not going into the productivity of that animal, it's not going into the meat. Now, if we can provide technology that converts that carbon better so that that animal is actually getting more of that carbon going into the meat, into the growth of the animal, and less going into the air as emissions, then it is a win-win because we're reducing emissions, but we are also increasing the growth rate, the carbon efficiency of that animal as it goes. And it's the same with all ag technologies. So you can think of fertilisers in the same way. If you're using fertilisers to grow better pastures or to grow better crops, but there is carbon going into the air as a result of that fertiliser application that is not carbon that is going into the growth of more grain or the growth of more pasture, then it's waste. It is an efficiency lost. So we can get the win-wins out of both reducing emissions and increasing productivity.
Well, Adam, as a producer, I guess on behalf of Cattle Australia, we've got the pillars of regulation coming down the pipeline at the same time as an industry that needs to be engaged much more broadly than it is at this current rate. What do we do to get those two imperatives to meet?
Sure. First and foremost, I'd probably challenge that we're not that engaged in this space. I mean, industry's done, the red meat industry in Australia in a global sense has done more than any other in the world, and we're actually leading that charge, I suppose, in terms of emission sequestration, mitigation. I guess there's been a bit of context around, Cattle Australia forming, came out of a long restructure. We've got a really new and refreshed drive of directly elected producers and levy payers like myself who are running this organisation. We're actually, we're certainly calling for a little bit of a holistic rethink about, how we account for our emissions. And, Richard's talking about, I guess, referred almost to the biogenic carbon cycle of grazing cattle. We talk a lot about that, but we don't actually measure it that way. So this space gets very, very complex very quickly. We start talking about different greenhouse gas metrics, et cetera, et cetera. But the important part is, I think, as Wayne said, rightly so, we have a lot more that we don't understand. We are very supportive of all of the, the interventions that industry's had to date, and we want the progressive nature of them to continue. But we are probably thinking we're not quite on a level playing field here. You've got to remember that, the grass-fed sector, unlike any other sector, has the ability to pull huge amounts of carbon out of the atmosphere. So we've got, as I say, we've got a conversation that's ongoing around how we account for it, and then how we're potentially incentivised to keep doing what we've been doing.
And it's interesting you make the comment too that the industry is quite engaged. At the grassroots, do you believe, smaller producers, do you believe they are as engaged?
Well, look, I think they are. If I reflect on our own experiences, if we attack it from that profitability, productivity, generally speaking, cattle people are very good custodians of their land. So, for instance, on our place, we've got a soil carbon project underway, but first and foremost, we're looking to return organic matter to the soil through, enhanced grazing management, rotational grazing, whatever. So that's the way that we attack that. People inherently understand that those two things go hand in hand. So I'm always a little bit puzzled about the context of, its environment or its productivity or its emissions or its how all these things balance out. Because I think, there is a broad understanding within industry at a grassroots level that these things can go hand in hand.
Interestingly, I guess another pillar to all of that is climate resilience. And Wayne, we've talked about productivity, we've talked about profitability. How does climate resilience fit into this with producers?
Okay. Well, at the moment, climate resilience is probably more in the focus. It's the here and the now. It's interesting how we sort of talk about climate change as though it's very distinctly different to climate variability or climate resilience. And to me, it's just it's a moving ahead. Climate change is happening slowly, so you're not going to see in 2 years' time, wow, this is very, very different to what it is at the moment. We're very much focused through a national program which the Queensland Government is part of around farm business resilience planning with a particular focus on climate resilience. So it's at its simplest, it's about producers understanding where they're at in terms of their production system, where they want to go, so what are their objectives, and it's then doing a risk assessment. So what are the upside risks, but importantly, what are the downside risks? So what are the risks I face at the moment? How likely are they to occur? What's the impact if it does occur? And rating those risks. And climate obviously is one of the biggest risks for most beef producers in Queensland and Australia. And we've got a layer on top of the fact that the climate variability we know at the moment may not be the climate variability we have in 10 to 15 years' time. So I think for a lot of producers, they're looking for information around that. We've just started up a climate outreach extension group, which will be a specialist group of climate extension officers within the government department, and we'll be looking to roll out workshops across the state with our partners, AgForce and so on, starting in the new financial year, basically to try and explain what the issues are about, what the carbon markets are about. But the first question has got to be know your number. So what is your carbon budget, basically? And there's some really good tools already that producers can use by themselves or perhaps a little bit of support. They've just got to go onto the MLA site. There's some really good tools there developed by the University of Melbourne. So that would be my first message to people is know what your number is and know where you are. And then you can start thinking about, well, how do I make changes and what's going to have the biggest impact for me? And the CRC is about bringing some tools and technologies that'll really help people make those changes or give them options to make those changes going forward.
I'm wondering if we could just finish off on the topic of carbon neutral targets and climate neutral targets. Adam, could you kind of clarify the distinction there?
How long have we got?
Exactly 40 seconds.
As I said earlier, look, it's very complicated, but I think at an industry level, we're critically aware of, again, not so much what we're doing. We'll keep doing what we have been doing, which is a fantastic job, but it's about where we want to head to it. And then I guess on top of that is the broader context and the broader narrative that we want to portray to our consumers. Are we a big bad emitter? Do we have a more cyclical nature to what we do? How do we frame that to general society? So I guess at a federal level, at a Cattle Australia level, we're kind of, as I said, looking at the bigger picture, playing the bigger game there.
Wayne, Richard, Adam, thank you all for your time today on a really intense topic, but one that I think is the theme of this particular beef. Thanks for your time today.
Thanks, Lyndsey.
Well, don't go anywhere. Coming up, we head to Tokyo next and meet the Queensland chef who has been crowned the nation's very best.